Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. Another episode. Guys, I think this is episode number 91. I think I asked the person that does my podcast, and she said 90 was last week. So we're coming up on two years here because we do record consistently every week. There may have been like 1 week that we missed. But welcome to the show. It's the Security Squawk podcast here with Ryan O'Hara, Randy Bryan, Reginald Andre. I'm your co-host, Bryan Hornung. We talk about the business of cybersecurity on this podcast. Our hope is to educate you and anyone around you about the threats and what you can start doing to protect yourself from cyber criminals, hackers, ransomware, business email compromise. We kind of run the gamut here. Which we're going to do on the show today. We have a major U.S. School district who is under a ransomware attack currently. We're going to dive into that a little bit. There's also a lot of ransomware attacks going on around the world. We're just not going to have time to really get into them all today. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about what is actual ransomware, because I know we mention it all the time on the show, but we don't really talk about what it is and all at once. I think we talk about it in bits and pieces. So we just kind of want to educate people a little bit on ransomware and how it operates today and how it can affect you today. We also have a major social media platform that had some data security issues. I wouldn't call it a hack, and we'll jump into that in a little bit. We have two major organizations, one a electronics manufacturer, the other one a National Football League team, both coming out with new information around previous breaches that their companies were involved with. Reason we like to highlight that kind of stuff is because, these cyber attacks can end up looking like they're not so bad, but then 6 months, a year down the road, information comes out where that is not the case. And that's usually the case 100% of the time, is that, companies are now letting people know the real damage months and months later when everything was forgot about because our attention spans aren't that good. And then one of our co-hosts had a little incident over the holiday weekend. And we're going to let him share that with you because I think there's a lot of good lessons learned there. So we're going to jump right into it, guys. We have Los Angeles County School District, or Los Angeles School District, happens to be the second largest U.S. school district, is dealing with a ransomware attack that hit its IT systems over the Labor Day weekend. Now, I know in New Jersey here, guys, we have schools starting. It started last week and starting this week. I don't know where California lies, but it wouldn't surprise me if, these guys decided to deploy ransomware right around the start of school. So after the article I'm looking at here on Bleeping Computer, that the school district first revealed district-wide technical issues after discovering that the attackers disrupted access to the LA USD systems, including their email servers. And then about 7 hours later, it confirmed that it was a ransomware attack, tagging the incident as criminal in nature. They've reported the incident, and they're working with law enforcement, the FBI, and CISA as part of an ongoing investigation and incident response. Says after the district contacted officials over the holiday weekend, the White House brought together the Department of Education, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency to provide rapid incident response support to the Los Angeles Unified, building on the immediate support by local law enforcement agencies. And I guess they're getting, obviously they're going to get a lot of support here. Even though the attack disrupted LAUSD infrastructure, the district said schools will still open today while it works to restore impacted servers, with some expected delays affecting some services. So they're going to try to run. What do you guys? What's your insight on this? I mean, it's kind of seems to me like a run of the mill ransomware attack, but they think they can kind of get by without their systems. What do you guys think?
I'm curious. I mean, because this is really, really quick. Did they have things in place where they were able to kind of catch it before it spread, and they're reacting to it that way? But for this to be the kind of stuff that we typically talk about, where they're caught with their pants down, for them to try and operate this quickly, seems a little bit difficult.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Rand.
Well, I was just going to say there may have a little bit of false sense of security because you've got several government agencies that have jumped in, which, by the way, most of the people that watch our show are regular business owners. And you can almost guarantee if you have a small or medium business, the government's not going to be able to jump in to help you if you get ransomware. This just so happens to be the second largest school district in the country. So this is kind of a strategic interest here. So, but yeah, maybe there's a false sense of security there that they're going through.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the same way. I mean, I guess they feel like they can get by with their curriculum, especially maybe early on in the year. This is one of two things for me. They either have really no clue what they're up against right now and what their incident response is going to be, because they just never planned for this, and they're going to get a quick crash course in what this is going to look like. I mean, this, to tell me that you can operate the entire school district, at business as usual when you have something like this going on, I find it hard to believe, because I have yet to see a business. I have yet to see a business where that's actually true, even though I've seen plenty of CEOs sit there and say, yeah, we don't have that. We don't have anything that important. We don't, we can operate with our stuff being down for 2 months if we had to, and then they get into the middle of it and they can't operate for 2 weeks. And that's, we'll see where this goes. We're literally in like less than 48 hours into this at this point.
Yeah, and that's what's unusual about it, though. Like, especially with as integrated into technology as most schools are, and I imagine the second largest school district in the country is probably even more so than most, but at least the same as what we see typically. So for them to be able to just, one, reach out and involve government agencies like that quick and disclose so quickly, which is not what we've seen lately. But two, then to also think that they can keep moving forward without having any type of issue and not delay classes. That there's a lot of question marks here.
Yep.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like it seems like the incident response is call CISA and the FBI, and let's hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really, the meeting probably hasn't even happened yet with the school board and the superintendent and the FBI as to okay, here's what you're up against. Here's what's going to have to happen over the next day, over the next 2 days, over the next week, over the next 2 weeks. And my guess is that this will impact students in some way, shape, or form. Especially if the email servers were attacked, right? I think it said that, right? The email was down. And I got to imagine that the school, talks to parents over email.
Why are they using email servers, man? I mean, that doesn't make sense, because they are a non-profit, right? Can't they get, or would they be considered government? Do they not get like a reduced price on 365? I mean, it seems like it would be better to not run their own servers.
I think you got to be careful too. Sometimes these stories, depending on.
It says it disrupted the systems, disrupted access to, including email servers. So we don't know what that means yet. So, but LA school district hit by ransomware. Andre, you've been quiet. You have anything you want to add before we move on here?
Yeah, the article did mention about how they're critical infrastructure, so their payroll, employee benefits. I think it's just like the main things that they are like looking to use right away is working. And like it's been mentioned, once the FBI and other resources does their analysis, they're going to come back and give them some bad news. Quick Google search, they have about 60,000 employees. So let's just say 40,000 of them have, school issue computers or devices, plus the students with their Chromebooks and everything like that. That's going to be an IT nightmare for somebody soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that they can pay their employees. And if I'm reading between the lines on the district added that instruction and staffing, well, okay, that doesn't mean those systems weren't affected. They can still teach. They still have teachers showing up, great, and they can still pay them. They could use an outside provider for that. Who knows? But their ability to communicate, I got to imagine they have like computer labs down, things like that. All that stuff is going on. Principals' offices and their secretaries probably don't have computers, which I don't.
Plus, if they're just engaging, and they're still waiting on the FBI and CISA to even get in there and take a look, I mean, it's possible that stuff's going to get shut down after they take a look, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they're assuming in their little public notice that it's criminal. I mean, a school district their size, yes, it could be criminal, but could also be nation state, So that'd be a bigger concern for me with a school district this big.
Yep. And we already knows what's going to happen, right? In about a year from now, the elementary kid socials were, we discovered the elementary middle school socials are now out in the dark web.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Yep. We don't know. It's too early. It's just hours into it. We'll update you next week on the show as things develop and as things are learning. It could be a lesson learned case in incident response. So before we move into the other topics, let's just spend a little bit of time educating people on ransomware, because we came across an article that kind of just said, laid out what ransomware is. And I thought, well, that would be a good thing to talk about on the show, because sometimes we might talk over people a little bit, even though we really don't intend to, and we try to break things down. What is ransomware? Like, what is it? Like, you guys keep talking about it on this show. I keep, but maybe it's a virus, or maybe you can't access your files. Let's go into a little bit deeper today and kind of talk about, that's what it is. Let's talk about how can you get it, or what are the common ways that you get it, and let's dispel some myths about how people think ransomware actually happens. I think we can do that in this discussion today too. So, ransomware is obviously, for me, and you guys can chime in on this, but ransomware is obviously, number one, malware that infects your system. The software runs and it, what we call, encrypts your data. So you have pictures, you have Word documents, Excel files. Those files, you go to click on them and they just don't open. And a lot of times you'll see like a README text message, or something on in that folder where you're trying to open that file, where it says and you're going to see this README file all over your computer. A lot of times it just pops up, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to actually go find the text file and open it and read it to see that some criminal has now encrypted all your files, and he's the one with the special key that's going to unlock the files so you can work with them again. That's kind of it in a nutshell. There's a lot more to, the different encryption that's used and things like that. A lot of people think, well, I encrypt my own hard drive. I encrypt my own files. You do, right? And if you use like Windows BitLocker, it's an easy way to encrypt your hard drive. There's actually a key that unlocks that. Now, modern computers today, you don't need to input that key, but before these things called TPM chips, you used to have to enter a key in to get your drive unlocked so you could actually use it. And encryption typically works that way. These things are, protected unless you have authorization to open, see, view it. And that's basically what these hackers are doing. They're using that technology and they're creating their own keys that they control. And they're not going to give you that key until you pay them usually hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, depending on how much data they've encrypted or how important they think it is or how big of a company they think you are. So anything you guys want to add there and as to like what your definition of ransomware is?
I think the other layer to it as well is the data exfiltration layer. So kind of one of the responses we get a lot is, oh, I got backups. So, if I get ransomware, it's no big deal. I just restore from backups. And even if that's true, and I say if because oftentimes we find out it isn't, or that the hackers were in there long enough to circumvent those backups anyway, what we do see a lot these days is also data exfiltration, where before they encrypt the data, they're downloading sensitive data off of your systems. And then so you may restore from backup, but then they send you a ransom, probably a higher ransom because you've kind of already circumvented their first attempt and said, hey, that's great that you got your data back, but we're going to release it to the public or whoever, if you don't pay us this ransom too, because we've got it in our hands, and they'll show you kind of some proof of that. So it's not just as cut and dry as encrypting your data. There are other aspects. They're going to get their money.
I mean, that's why they call it ransomware, because just like if there was a kidnapping involved, there's always a ransom involved with kidnapping. And they're basically saying, we've kidnapped your data and, doing these nerdy geeky things to keep you out of it. And we want money to give it back to you. They'll also say, hey, we're going to release it out on the dark web if you don't pay. It's just like in a kidnapping situation where they might say, hey, we're going to do this or that to the victim if you don't pay. If you do other things, certain things might happen. But basically, bottom line is they've kidnapped your data. They've kidnapped your data. You can get one by you can get it by maybe clicking on an email. Maybe there is bad guys got a foothold in your network from some other reason and takes advantage of unpatched software on your computer or this or that. But bottom line is they have a multitude of ways that they can try to basically kidnap your data and try to get money from you. It's a form of extortion.
And I think one thing we want to also tell our audience is how easy it is and how bad of a job, the technology industry is doing. For example, as Randy mentioned, there's vulnerabilities in the system because the computers weren't patched. So we know there's known ways of how to fix something on the computer. And then the IT department, IT guy, CEO is not then implementing that. There's also, like, for example, remote desktop, which forever everybody's been saying, turn it off, use a different way, and that's still done. So a lot of times it's us humans that are actually the ones causing that. If they clicked on an email and they then followed a couple of steps, and then now it goes into the system. So
it's like you never even left.
Yeah, I was hearing most everything. My page was locked up. So anyway,
good. You should get a Best Buy and get a new Switch.
Nah.
So one of the things I guess, people should be aware too is this happens rarely because these guys want to get paid, but some ransomware will actually delete or threaten to delete your files totally. As Ryan mentioned, it's usually not the case anymore. They exfiltrate the data. They figured it's better to steal it than delete it. But the other thing too is that if you do pay the ransom, it's not always guaranteed that these decryptors will work, right? Because we're dealing with technology, and sometimes the keys don't unlock all the files.
Or sometimes they don't even give you the keys. Right. You're dealing with criminals. That doesn't make them honest.
They do unlock it because it's that whole thing where they say, hey, they want their reputation, of paying to kind of, be the folklore of the land. So everybody who pays the ransom will tell their friends, yes, I paid the ransom and I got my data back. So that'll get you to pay when you get attacked.
The reputation is key, though. So the one that we dealt with earlier in the year, that was kind of the situation where finding out who did it they did not have a very good track record of paying up. In fact, their track record said, people who typically pay the initial ransom are then hit with a second ransom after that. Oh, that was easy. Do you really want your data back? Now you got to pay us this amount. And so that was kind of the advice at that point was you're probably not going to get your data back. You may pay them and get nothing. So
I think the statistics, like only a third get 100% of their data back. Probably 70%, if I had to guess, 80% get the majority of their data back if they pay. But it's a very small percentage that actually get every little bit of it back.
And it's also not like an instant thing, too. They don't get those keys and they're back up and running the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing I wanted to kind of mention with people, because Randy kind of mentioned it. It can happen by starting with, clicking on a phishing email, a link. It could be a text message that you get with a link. There's all different kinds of ways that they're trying to attack you these days. But the attackers are typically it can happen where it's just a few hours. They get into your system and a few hours later you have ransomware. It usually takes about 180 days for ransomware to be deployed once the initial access is gained by the cyber criminal. There's a lot of different reasons for that, which we talked about extensively on other episodes of the show. Probably not enough time to go into it today, but that's the reality of it. These guys are going to be in your network for a very, very long time in most cases, because they know businesses aren't at the point where they're able to detect their presence. So there's no incentive for them to do this quickly, like a smash and grab. Literally, they're walking around the jewelry store deciding what things they're going to take and what they're not going to take. Or is this jewelry store just full of fake diamonds? Is it even worth, deploying ransomware on? Maybe it's just better we just sit on their network and, spy on them, or try to, trick their employees or their HR department and changing their payroll information to us. They're devising the exact tact that they're going to use when they're in their network, because quite frankly, if you don't have data, they're going to get you some other way. Right? If they're like, this isn't really worth a ransomware attack because they have 4 computers and, let's just sit on their email. Let's just see if we can steal their email credentials or get into their Office 365 some way. These are all things that our cyber criminals are doing while they're trying to decide whether they're going to deploy ransomware on you or not. The reason I point this out is because we could do a better job at detection. And if we can detect they're in there, you can thwart them before they actually do any damage. So why do you guys think these ransomware attacks are so common?
Because they're
do you think, maybe let me go back. Do you think they're common, or maybe I'm just...
No, they're definitely common, and they're common because they work and they're getting their money. Yeah.
I guess then one question is I don't believe that most business owners we know it's common because we deal with it all the time, but I don't think people outside of our industry think it's common.
It's because people don't talk about it. They're embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
For as many people as we talk to that say, I would never fall for that. We're never going to click on something like that. We know better. So because that's kind of the prevalent thought, when somebody does get hit by it, because it is easy to get hit by, because some of this stuff is easy to click on because it looks so good, they're embarrassed. They think it was their fault and they don't want to talk about it. So then nobody knows it's really happening because everybody sweeps it under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we think these attacks are so common? Obviously, they're lucrative, but what else?
They don't get caught. There's no consequence to them doing this.
Yeah, that is true, 100%. The prosecution rate on these crimes are very, very low. They're very, very difficult to prosecute. And I think the other thing too is we've talked about it on the show before. Ransomware as a service. Basically outsourcing that piece of it. Like I mentioned, hackers can be on your network and then they can call up some company that just does ransomware, right? I could be a bad guy, get into your network, and I can call up a ransomware group on the dark web and say, hey, I got access to this network. help me deploy ransomware on it, and I get a cut of whatever they collect. And that makes it a lot easier for more businesses to get hit because, you know, you got people working on getting access, and once they get access, they can outsource the ransomware piece to somebody else. So we'll go around the horn here, and then we'll move on. Start with Rye. Give me one thing somebody can do to protect themselves from a ransomware attack.
To me, one of the most important things is just having systems in place to monitor for things that may have gotten past your protection. I think that's one of those things that people don't think about. They think about protection on the front end, and usually that's minimal, but making sure that you have systems in place to protect, to identify things that get through any protection that you already have in existence.
For me, I would say train your employees. You know, even a CEO can go halfway in and almost fall for something. So train.
We're going to talk about that later.
Yeah. It really boils down to the 10 or 12 things that we always talk about. And
just one.
One of them, I'll talk about the unsexiest of all the things is patching.
Okay.
You need to patch your computers because if they click on a link, if one of your people clicks on a link and it tries to run something, if you're patched, you got a pretty good chance of it not working on your machine. So keep your stuff patched.
Yep. I'll go with what's that?
What's your one?
I'm going to go with like privileged access management, right? So you know what's being installed, have a way to block it, know what's being accessed, and have a way to block it. You know, big deal.
Good stuff.
So I'm going to pull up our, we have two. No, we're not going there yet. Oh boy. TikTok. Oh boy. So it was pretty wild over the weekend. People were all over Twitter. I popped on my Twitter for a minute and I was like, oh, what's going on over at TikTok? Everybody's freaking out about it. So Randy, what's going on over at TikTok? Why is everybody freaking out about it?
So on top of the normal shenanigans, which we can cover or not, up to you, a hacking group, if you will, called Against the West. Basically, the group's not against the West. The group is against everybody that's against the West. Anyway, they claim.
Well, that's kind of a weird name to have.
Yeah. So we're living in the modern age of.
I mean, wouldn't against the anti-West be a better name? Okay.
Yeah, part of the world we live in. So anyway, they claim to have gotten on a server, an Alibaba server, which is basically Amazon for China. They got on a server. They claimed to pull out SQL databases and some other things like that. And then they've leaked some of this stuff. First glance, you know, people are like, oh, it's this is junk. And, you know, of course, TikTok denied it. But then also during the weekend, some people have come out and said, oh, no, wait, we've dug a little deeper. There really seems to be some legit data in here. At this point, they don't know if the group Against the West actually took it or if maybe they bought it from a third party, you know, on like the dark web. And then they're trying to, you know, just get some notoriety, if you will, and kind of get the name of their organization out and all that. But bottom line is it appears that some source code and some SQL database stuff has been leaked out of leaky TikTok. So this is on top of other stuff that leaks just because. Don't get me started. But bottom line, this could be a big deal because this is one of the most popular, one of the most popular apps. I know in the Android store, there's over 1 billion downloads. It's extremely popular app. So this could be a really big deal.
It's already notorious for grabbing a lot more data than it probably needs. So that's,
Yeah, just read their terms of service. Oh, gosh. Hush.
Are they any different than Facebook or Instagram?
Yes. Yeah, it's worse. It's worse. Well, maybe not worse, but they're definitely different. So they seem to be more willy-nilly about it. So I don't know. That's a good answer.
So for the people that are going to continue using TikTok, right? We all have clients that are going to just continue using it. Is it safer to view it on your browser on your computer and not on your phone?
That's a great question. So according to their TOS, from what I understand, they can scan all of the devices around you, other devices that they can get to, that they want to, they will. What I would suggest would be putting it on an app that then you can then disable. I would put it on my phone, maybe, then you can disable it. That's a good question, though, because maybe if you were in a browser, then they would have access to less stuff. Not quite sure what the best answer is on that one, Andre.
So I'm gonna hamstring your answer here before I give you the question, Randy. But you can't answer both. It's an either or. When it comes to TikTok, when we're worried about privacy and data security, who should be more concerned? The consumer, the scroller, or the content producer?
Which question can I not answer? I only heard
I'm just
one.
saying, you can't say both. You can't say like the consumers and scrollers, like because I
consumer.
I agree, because I tell people that too. Like, people are like, "What are you doing on TikTok?" I have TikTok. Follow me. What are you doing on TikTok? What I do on TikTok is I go on there, I create a video, I hit post, and I move on. Right? I move on with my life. I don't sit there and scroll on TikTok. I don't click on things. I don't like things. I think that's the data that they're collecting on, and they're trying to, use algorithms and matrices to figure out like what this person likes and what we can target to them. I mean, I've heard from people that they say like just search for something or like a certain video on TikTok, and the algorithm is amazing. It'll bring you kind of what you want to see. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm thinking like, if you're a scroller, if you're somebody who uses social media kind of voyeuristically, you're not a content producer, you're not putting, videos and stuff like that out there. You're not posting on social media like we do for our businesses. And you're just that person that goes on there and scrolls, comments, likes, shares. That's the stuff I think those are the people that need to be worried, because that's the data collection. You agree with me, Randy?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have a false sense of security if I was just a content producer.
No. Yeah. Right.
And what you're referring to is the siloing, which it's got probably the strongest siloing of any known social media platform on the planet. And you're right. If you click one time on, old cars, you're going to get basically lambasted with videos about old cars if they exist.
That's right.
So,
even if you don't like the video, like if you just watched it for like 10 seconds, like they gauge how much you watch the video and stuff like that. Yeah. All right. So let's move on. We got two post-breach updates over the weekend. The first one came on Friday, late Friday, as everyone was heading to their vacation spots, the shore, the beach, the mountain. Rain, did you go anywhere? No? You can go anywhere?
No, I didn't. My wife was with her mother, and so with my mother-in-law, and so me and the kids just hung out and did almost nothing the whole weekend. We went swimming, I think, one time.
Good job. So Samsung released a press release and said that customer data was compromised in their July data breach, which we covered on this show. So Andre, what was in the press release?
Well, same thing we always talk about, private user data such as name, date of birth, product registration date, demographic information, and contact numbers. So they are adamant in saying that the customer's credit card numbers and social security data was not released or not compromised. And what's worrying for us is that this is the second time in 2022 that Samsung has had a data breach. Back in March, we talked about lapsus, where they stole about 189 gigs of data, sensitive data online. So as we just talked about a few minutes ago, where they come back, So you get hit once, they come back. But Samsung is a $1 billion company. People are going to continue buying from them and continuing to give them their information. And it doesn't seem like they're going to get too hit from this or hurt from this.
No, TVs are about to get real cheap, so people are going to be buying a lot of Samsung TVs. Plus, they, quite frankly, in my opinion, they're the number one producer of Android phones. I mean, they're it's Apple and Samsung, in my opinion.
Oh no, that's true. I think Samsung's is the biggest phone manufacturer on the planet. So
yeah, right.
So
So I mean, here we go. You got your hardware being compromised, hardware vendors being compromised. You got your software vendors being compromised, and you also got your football teams being compromised. But Randy, did you want to say something before we talk about the 49ers press release?
Well, so I was going to actually ask Ryan, and then I decided, well, I'll just say it because Ryan, we always talk about this. This basically just follows the normal breach release timeline. Nothing to see here.
Playbook,
a little bit more, but nothing else. A little bit more. I mean, and I wonder. They say no Social Security, no credit cards. I wonder if a month from now we're going to find out that those were actually released. So.
Randy's got to reboot his Switch.
It was a computer. It wasn't a Switch.
Poor Randy.
Yeah. Did I lock up just now?
Yeah, totally.
He was fine on my end. He was asking me questions.
Yeah, but then he froze. Oh, he froze up on me at the very end.
Maybe you froze up on us.
Maybe Brian needs a new Best Buy Switch.
I'm right into the wall right here. I'm good.
All right, so we want to talk about the 49ers?
I do. I want to, because here's another one. And, like we said, if anyone didn't hear our last show, by the way, we all said we'll hear about this past weekend's Labor Day breaches. Yeah, we're hearing about LA County or school district today. We'll hear about those in closer to Halloween. And, it was so much more fun doing cybersecurity podcasts and YouTube channels back in the day when nobody knew how to do incident response.
Right.
Unfortunately,
but at the same time, while it doesn't make for as interesting interesting for us, it's good to see that places are following a playbook. I mean, it's not as sexy for news, but.
No, it's not sexy for news, and it's harder to get the point across that this stuff is serious because it gets delayed. Information is not being shared, and I get that that's what we're doing now, but I think I said it a few weeks ago, like we don't know the collateral damage of how we're doing incident response today. We could figure out in 5 years that it's way better to, talk about this stuff as soon as possible rather than bury it. Talk about it in a press release 2 months later. Especially
it's just the panic syndrome, though, because in order to do it responsibly, they would have to disclose ahead of time to let people know that stuff is going on, but they don't have enough time forensically to know what happened. So at that point, you're really just scaring everybody who may be a customer of that company. So I mean, it's one of those give and take kind of situations. I think. People are still trying to figure out what the playbook should be in a lot of cases. So we don't have that.
That's my point. We don't know. And I'm not saying the answer is going to be, we should go to the tops of the mountains and say, hey, we got hit by a certain ransomware group. But that may be what we decide, down the road.
I think there needs to be better post-op. So like once it's, not just, hey, this many records was disclosed, but, hey, we got hit, here's how it happened. Here's what we decided to do differently, so you can take these lessons and learn from it without having to go through what we went through. And I think there's definitely not enough of that.
Right. Indicators of compromise being released. Here's what they did when they were in. Here's how they got in, like that kind of stuff. Like, we don't need to sensationalize like the amount of money for the ransom. We don't even need to know that. And that's usually what we would find out, right? It's ransomware. They're asking for this much. No, it's ransomware. And here's how they got in. And here's the group. And here's what this group typically does. Like the FBI does a good job of putting that out once they have enough information, but I think it needs to happen quicker. So the 49ers, lots of information stolen. 20,000 people doesn't sound like a lot, but there's probably more than that would be my guess.
Well, it doesn't get into details too as to who those 20,000 people are. I mean, I imagine that we're talking about not just people who are part of the organization, employees, things like that, but probably season ticket holders, things along those lines. But the original attack occurred in early February of this year. And so now, after conducting a thorough review of the files that were impacted, they're finding individuals whose information was contained in those files, and they're starting to let those people know. So yeah, belonging to 20,930 impacted individuals. And let's see, discovered that the incident involved the name and social security number of 7 Maine residents, which is interesting, on the complete other side of the country. But yeah, it's just another one of those situations where this is now 7 months down the road since the attack originally occurred, where we're starting to get the actual impact of it. I don't remember this one specifically. I'd have to go back and look at the original story, but I imagine it was like we were talking about. It follows the playbook. Hey, we discovered that there was an incident, and at this point, we don't believe anybody was impacted. And then later down the road, in a much smaller story, oh, by the way, sorry, almost 21,000 people were impacted.
100%. So that's it. I mean, that's the picture we want to paint here for people, so they start to understand this stuff. Is depending on how prepared you are before the event will be the determining factor on whether you can release something in a week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, 4 months, 7 months. As you see, it took the San Francisco 49ers a lot longer than it did Samsung. So just think about the things that you're doing in your business. And if you don't know what you're doing in your business, then you need to seek a professional who can help you understand where you are and where you need to go. So we're going to move on to our last topic of the day, and we're going to kind of pass this off to
the hot seat topic,
Andre. And Andre had a little incident this over the weekend, and we kind of talk about these things all the time on the show, but rarely does it affect one of us. And it, in Andre's situation, we'll let him tell you, it got a little close, not that close, but further than you would think. And why we want to talk about this and why we want Andre to tell his story and his experience is because it just goes to show you how this can happen to anyone. And the hustle and bustle of life, sometimes we let our guard down, right? Depending on the environment that we're currently in. Maybe we're at a ball game and our kids, at the plate, and the bases are loaded and they're down by 3 runs and your kid can win the game, right? And something comes across your phone. Just think about, you might not always be in the right mindset where you can look at something in hindsight and go, well, how could you fall for that, right? So, Andre, you told us the story, but why don't you take us to what was happening right before you got that text message as well? Like, what situation were you in that day? Because I think it happened on Saturday, right? Was it
no, Sunday.
So it was the weekend. It was the holiday weekend. And what were you doing?
Yeah, so just got out of church, and I had 2 missed calls and a text message from my bank. And the message says, did you just authorize a Zelle transfer of $5,000? And for me, that was very suspicious. So I contacted my COO and my CPA and just, hey, are you, was this you? And they both said no. So then from there, I put no on the text message. And it said a representative will call you in a couple of minutes. And a couple of minutes later, someone called me, and it was they sounded U.S., no overseas accent or anything like that. And they said, well, someone's been trying to transfer and successfully transferred $5,000, $4,000, and $1,000 payments. And it was going to somebody named William Mickerson. And they said, are you sure this wasn't you? I said, nope, it was definitely not me. And then from there, they gave me the option of going through the process to dispute the claim. So they asked me to go to my bank's phone app, and then I went to Zelle. And then what started to get me suspicious is because they now wanted me to add a recipient, which would be they wanted me to add that, and then give me the confirmation code, and then I would put the amount, and then the money would come back to me. So as soon as they told me the confirmation code, and it started with 954, which is an area code here in South Florida, and then the rest of the rest of the digits came out to a total of 10 digits, I realized, whoa, something is wrong here. And then I immediately hung up. I didn't send any money. I called the number back in my card, U.S. holiday. Nobody from the bank is calling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like this close to losing almost 10 grand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like Bryan said, the point of this being is they know what they're doing when they do these things. Calling on a holiday weekend, calling around the time when a lot of people are getting out of church and you got a lot of stuff going on. And you don't think about these things, doing it in such a way that isn't as obvious as people have been trained to believe these things are. Like, we're used to the old Nigerian prince scams where they it was very clear that they had broken English and punctuation issues. The stuff that we see these days, like it's easy to fall for it, especially if you're in a situation where you're not in that normal frame of mind where you'd really scrutinize that stuff a lot more. I mean, if you got that message right now, it probably would be a different story than the frame of mind you were in at that moment. And they plan for that and they do it on purpose.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we talked about, Andre, is like I said, like a lot of times I've gotten those text messages before, and it usually comes from a bank that I don't do business with, right? And you pointed out something that I think you should point out again for our listeners, and that was something about the PPP information.
Yeah, so you can go online and actually see the dollar amount a company received and the issuing bank. And in my case, the bank that I deal with was the issuing bank. So even when I called back that 1-800 number, it was the same recording. Like the bank has the same voice. It was the same recording. And the first thing they wanted me to do was put in my account number. And I was like, nope, not doing that. So it's really sophisticated. And I feel sorry for, and with Zelle too, which is very important. Zelle is considered a cash transaction. So if you send money, there is no disputes. You lost it.
Yep, it's gone.
Yep.
It's
So real quick, so just business owners, just so they know, the hackers can marry your PPP data with these scams. It's that simple. They can look at your bank that you used, and if it's in Andre's case, Bank of America, then they start sending you text messages from Bank of America. So go ahead, Randy.
Well, I was just going to say it's really weird that they've published. I've thought this from day one. Why are they publishing the PPP info? I mean, I don't understand that. Like, they could do, if it needs to be public, then do the company and the amount. But why in the crap are they putting the bank on there? Because You're right. You could use that as your master hack sheet. Hey, let's take all the data we can get off the dark web and let's correlate it with the PPP info. And then, man, you got two loaded guns right there. You can start going after CEOs with, especially on a holiday weekend. Yikes.
I think the other lesson here too, just to kind of, debrief this a little bit, is if you get a phone call from somebody claiming to be anybody that, could have an issue like this, your bank is a perfect example, instead of taking that call and assuming that that's who they are, hang up, say, I get it. I'm going to call, I'm going to hang up. I'm going to go to the website and I'm going to call the official phone number. So that way I know for sure who I'm talking about. You can't trust just because, even caller ID, what it says coming in.
So there will probably be a day when the hackers get into the website and change the phone number and go undetected.
So I'll ask Andre this and we'll wrap up because we got to end in less than 4 minutes. So one of the other things that you said that helped lower your guard was that the person who called you sounded English-speaking American.
Yeah.
Any chance that you think that and only I was going to ask it before, but then I was like, no, I'm not going to ask it. But I'm going to ask it now because you said that when you called the number back, it was the same kind of prompt that if you call your actual bank. Do you think there's any chance that the voice you heard on the line was a deep fake?
Oh, wow.
and that they have replicated an American voice to carry out the scam because they know it'll be 80% more successful if they do that versus calling in their native, language accent.
Absolutely, because anytime I call my bank, they make it a point to say they're U.S. They're like, "This is Amy in North Carolina" or something like that. So I would agree, because obviously it's going to be cheaper to do it overseas, and of course the ramifications of someone here in the U.S. getting caught is much higher. So yeah, that makes sense with that.
I mean, it'd be amazing to me. I mean, I know we've read about it, but I've never, and we're not saying that that's what this is, but you got to think, we're hearing and seeing stories about deep fakes. It was used against Twitter when the Twitter hack went down, when those accounts got taken over. It's very well possible that these scams have now evolved into using deep fakes, so you're more comfortable with the person on the other end of the line. If somebody's got a really thick foreign accent from India, Philippines, wherever in the world, and somebody's gonna be like, "Yeah, no, you're not from Bank of America."
Right.
Be interesting to find out. One day we might. But thanks for sharing. That was a thankfully you came out of that okay. But you can see how close. You have one of the guys from the show who talks about this stuff all the time. Even though I don't think they got across the 50-yard line on you. They didn't. You didn't back them up into the end zone either. So,
I know we only have 1 minute left, but the question now I'm asking myself is: let's just say I did get swindled by $10,000. I think I would have been too embarrassed to tell it to anybody. Remember how we're going back to what Ryan was saying? People are embarrassed.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got to destigmatize that.
Agreed.
Destigmatize sharing that you were hacked. Like that's, I mean, you general, not you personally.
Yeah.
That people in general.
Yep, wild. So, all right, guys, appreciate your efforts today and your insights. Please remember, everyone, share our show. It helps not only us get more visibility, but it gets the word out and it gets people educated. And the more you share our stuff, the more, all these algorithms that all these companies have around technology and content, other people who you aren't related to, at least that, we might get shown as a suggestion for them. That's how all this stuff works. So if you can like us, subscribe to us, give us a review. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next broadcast. Take care, everyone.
See ya.